Welcome Management 6133 students to week 10. In week 10, we're talking about the inventory and warehouse management processes. So we'll cover the inventory management process. We'll also cover the warehouse management process and discuss the organizational and master data needed in the overall process. And then we'll quickly look at the reports you can run in these processes. So just to give you some background, the inventory and warehouse management processes are concerned with the storage and movement of material within an organization, not outside of it, but within an organization. And when we're talking about warehouse management, we're specifically talking about processes that enable companies to manage materials more effectively. So not all companies have their warehouses managed, but we will be looking at, if you do use SAP functionality, what a warehouse management process would look like. And we'll be specifically looking at the linkages between inventory management and warehouse management. So starting with the inventory management process, we've talked about a lot of this process already in our other processes. There are 4 goods movements in the inventory management process. The first one is goods receipt. And we talked about goods receipt in the procurement process. So in the procurement process, we receive material from a supplier and we move that material into inventory. So this results in an increase in inventory. We also talked about goods receipt in the production process. So in the production process, when we move material onto the shop floor to make finished goods, that's a goods receipt, and we are increasing the inventory on the production floor. So the second goods movement in the inventory management is goods issue. And you should recall we talked about the goods issue in the fulfillment process. So in the fulfillment process, we are moving material out of our organization and issuing it to our customers. So this results in a decrease in inventory. We also talked about goods issue in the production process. So when we've made finished goods, we issue those goods back into inventory. And again, this is resulting in a decrease in inventory from the shop floor. So the third type of goods movement in the inventory management process is a transfer posting. So a transfer posting is where we're changing the stock status. So we may change it from unrestricted use into quality inspection or blocked or in transit, and it doesn't necessarily involve a physical movement. So that's the third type of goods movement. And the fourth type is a stock transfer. And this is where we're physically moving materials within the organization from one organizational level or location to another. So it's, again, within the company, and we're just moving it from one organizational level to the next. So when we are having plant-to-plant movements, there are some limitations. And one of the limitations with plant-to-plant movements is it can't take into account the cost of transporting materials between plants. It also can't track the progress of the transfer, and the valuation can only be based on the book value of the materials. So that's why a lot of companies use stock transport orders. This is where plants purchase the materials and another plant sells them. So it's like a purchase order for plant-to-plant movements. So that is the inventory management process. So it's really about the goods movement within an organization. So now let's take a look at warehouse management. And like with all processes we've looked at, we need to set up the organizational data in SAP before we can start doing the process. So the key organizational data in the warehouse management process are the warehouses. So warehouses are associated with one or a multiple combination of plants and storage locations. And the association between storage locations in a warehouse, this is what provides the linkage between inventory management processes and warehouse management processes. So when you're linking warehouses to storage locations, you have to keep in mind the rules that apply. And the first rule is a warehouse must be linked to at least one storage location. And you can see in our example, it's actually linked to 3 locations, and that's okay. It has to be linked to at least one. A warehouse can be linked to storage locations across multiple plants. In this case, it's only linked to this plant, but it could be located to multiple plants. A storage location can be linked to only one warehouse. So you can see these are only linked to one warehouse. And the fourth rule is not all storage locations must be linked to a warehouse. So you can see these storage locations aren't linked to a warehouse. You may have a storage location in an office, so it doesn't have to be linked to a warehouse. So this shows the structure of a warehouse. A warehouse is divided into smaller areas, so we can see how it's hierarchical in manner. And a storage type is a division of the warehouse based on the characteristics of the space, materials, or activity. Storage types can also be based on how materials are stored or on a material specification. And the assignment of storage locations to a warehouse, this is what links the inventory management activities to warehouse management activities. So interim storage areas represent the physical links between those inventory management and warehouse management processes. As we can see, there's different storage types, so we could have shelf storage, pallet storage, or storage and receiving, or storage and shipping. Storage types are further divided into storage sections, as we can see here. A storage section groups bins with similar characteristics. So as you can see here, we could group bins that have fast-moving material or slow-moving material or heavy or light. And each storage type must have at least one storage section. So storage areas can also be divided into picking areas rather than storage sections. So a picking area is usually a division of a storage area based on removing or picking materials. So storage bins are usually grouped together based on similar picking strategies, such as employees who are authorized to pick from specific bins, or deliveries that can be allocated to multiple picking areas to ease, the parallel picking. And then we have bins in each of these storage sections. So here's a great example of how San Diego's plant is laid out. And here's an example of how the warehouse is divided in San Diego. And here's a good example of bins in rack storage. So now let's look at the master data associated with the warehouse management process. So the material master and storage bins are the key master data in warehouse management. In warehouse management view, there's additional data on the material that must be included in the master record. So there's three really important data relevant to the warehouse management view. The first is the basic data, which is similar to all processes, but you need to make sure things that are specific, such as unit of measure, are identified. You want to identify placement and removal strategies. And you also want to indicate the data regarding the storage bins where material will be stored, so mins and maxes, those sorts of things. And then, of course, storage bins themselves. So these are the smallest units of space in a warehouse, and this is where material is physically stored. And they have unique addresses that identifies their location. So usually a bin will have an address of a row, stack, and shelf so we can find them. And then within a bin, you can also have quants. And these are specific quantities of material that have similar characteristics and are stored in a single bin. So you may have road helmets and t-shirts stored together. So as we said, bins have addresses, so we can say which row they're located, which stack, and which shelf. So let's look at the process itself. And as we said, the warehouse management process is triggered by, buying something and having to move that material into a warehouse, or selling something and having to move it out of your warehouse. So the first step in the warehouse management process is the plan warehouse movement. So this is where we start. We plan the movement. And we plan the movement with a transfer requirement. And this is a document that companies use to plan the movement of materials into and out of bins in a warehouse. So obviously we need data on the materials and bins in the movement, transaction data, and the outcome of this step is the actual transfer requirement. and we post the change notice in here. So after we've planned the movement, the next thing we need to do is execute the movement or get authorization to do the movement. So after the transfer requirement has been created, we create this transfer order, which is a transaction document that authorizes warehouse employees to physically move the materials. So plan the movement with a transfer requirement, then we authorize it with a transfer order. And then the next step is to actually move the materials. So creating the transfer order allows the warehouse employees to physically move the materials from the source bins to the destination bins. And then once we've actually moved them, we need to confirm the movement. So confirming the movement involves updating the transfer order to indicate that the movement is done and the quantities moved from and to various bins are entered into the transfer order and the order is saved. And if all the materials have been moved, then the step is complete. So this just shows inventory management and warehouse management steps in the procurement process. So we buy something and we do a goods receipt to receive the material. And when we do a goods receipt, that material is put into interim storage, and then a transfer requirement is created to plan the movement of the material from interim storage to storage bins. So we plan it, we create the transfer order to get authorization, and then we actually move it from interim storage to the storage bins, so then the transfer order is confirmed. And then within fulfillment, when we're sending the material to the customer, an outbound delivery is created and material is in storage bins, and then a transfer order is created to get permission to move it from storage bins into interim storage, and then we post goods issue the material and we confirm that the material has been moved from storage bins into interim storage and then to our customer. And in production, the same thing, right? We pull the material from the bins into interim storage to the production floor. We make the finished goods, and then we move the material from the interim storage into the storage bins using the transfer orders. And here is the example of stock transfers. So transfer requirements for stock transfers throughout a location. So moving material or updating their statuses, their stock statuses on the system. So that's the processes. And as with all processes in SAP, there's wonderful reporting. So here's one of the reports you may want to do. It's a list of transfer orders. So these are all the list of the movements that have to be done. And another report may be a storage location inventory report. So it displays inventory at the storage location level, and specifically we can see here there's 50 road helmets in the trading goods storage location. Here is an inventory warehouse inventory report after goods receipt and a transfer requirement are created. And this displays inventory in the San Diego warehouse. So we can see here that there are 50 road helmets in the interim receiving storage area. So we're planning to move them into their storage bin locations. So here's warehouse stock after the transfer order is created. So note that the 50 helmets in the interim receiving area now appear under the pick quantity. So pick is telling us, okay, we can pick them to put them into their storage bin locations. And here's warehouse stock after a transfer order is confirmed. And here's a great one. This is a bin status report. So it displays a list of bins that contain materials. So we can see this bin has road helmets and t-shirts. Here's more of the details within the storage bin. And as we said, in a bin you can have different types of material. We call those quants. So hopefully that helps you understand the inventory warehouse and warehouse management processes.